Hello everybody. 50 years ago, an iconic, renowned, and legendary progressive rock group released their magnum opus to the world, hailed as one of the greatest rock albums of all time, and I agree with both of those sentiments. A piece which has stood the test of time and has managed to be an invigorating and influential piece of art 50 years later. It needs absolutely no introduction, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, today we're talking about Sorry, I must have misspoken there. It's Larks, Tongues and Aspic by King Crimson. You thought I was going to be talking about that mid-ass album as my prog rock goat. You would be sorely fucking mistaken, my friend, because Larks, Tongues and Aspic is better. Larks, Tongues and Aspic, the fifth album by progressive rock band King Crimson. Their debut, let's go back to that, in the Court of the Crimson King, otherwise known as the album which has the song which was sampled by the song that's in Saints Row 3. This album established King Crimson as an exciting and electrifying progressive rock band which fused jazz, classical rock, world music, and added instruments like the mellotron, which instantly became a prog rock staple in the early 70s. People were particularly enamoured with their musicianship in their live performances, how effortlessly they improvised with each other, and just how energetic and unpredictable these performances were. And unfortunately, their next two albums, to a lot of people, weren't necessarily on the same level as their debut. In the Wake of Poseidon, for example, I think most people agree it's just an artistic retread of everything that the debut did, but it just does it worse. Even within the structure of the album itself and the songs, it just seems to mirror the first album so closely, and it's just, when you have the retrospective and comprehensive view of the King Crimson discography, what they'd go on to do, just feels like a bit of a fucking roadblock, doesn't it? Like, get the fuck out the way! But Lizard, however, I have personal beef with any one of you twats that does not want this album. I fucking love Lizard, and I do not give a piss what you think. Lizard is this sort of weird, zany, pastoral album that has loads of black comedy elements to it, and I really like that about it. I think tracks like Indoor Games and Happy Family are just really fucking weird and funny. But unfortunately, a lot of people didn't really like the style of songwriting on this album, and people really didn't like the vocals, but haters. And you have Islands, which by every right is just a fantastic album. Form and Terror Lady, a beautiful opener. The end track, Islands, is so gorgeous. Amazing piano parts on that song. And then you have Ladies of the Road, which is like the sluttiest prog rock song ever written. But people missed that energy. People missed the rock. They fucking wanted the improvisation back. They wanted all that electricity that King Crimson brought with the first album, which is why in 1973, Robert Fripp, the lead guitarist and only remaining member of King Crimson throughout every single album, just acquired a group of fantastic musicians. First of all, Bill Bruford, the acclaimed drummer of progressive rock band Yes, John Wetton, who was responsible for vocals, David Cross, a fantastic violinist. I believe he also played the keys and mellotron on this album as well. And then you have a nutty experimental percussionist, Jamie Muir. Yes, this album has two drummers, it's bass. All of this brings us to Larks, Tongues and Aspic. From mine and many other perspectives, there are two fundamental traits of this album, those being contrast and dynamics. The contrast is more in regards to the themes and how the musicians work off of each other, and the dynamics are the dynamic range, the sound, the blistering punchy highs and the soft lows. Beginning with contrast, just immediately looking at the album cover itself, you can see a direct contrast. The crescent moon wrapping around the sun is two contrasting forces forming together to create a cohesive image. Night and day, light and dark, they work in tandem. And if you wanted to be even more of an insufferable wanker, you could even say the cream and maroon contrast with each other, but they're two different colours. Of course they fucking contrast. And I mean, furthermore, you could argue that there's a really stiff contrast with the softness of a track like Book of Saturday, and just how relentlessly hard I shag your mum to it. In all seriousness, even the roles of the band members themselves, there consists of a big contrast. Two percussionists, Jamie Muir and Bill Bruford, they're very different roles in the album. This is what Fripp had to say about them. I suddenly thought, well, Bill's a lovely drummer, but perhaps he's a little too straight for some things. Then I thought of this nut, Jamie Muir, whom I'd just met And I thought, well, Jamie's a great drummer, but he's not really straight enough for some of the things I'd like him to do. Now, while sitting in the bath, lovely image, I suddenly had this vivid idea to just use them both. And it seemed so right. Yeah, it was right. Well done, Robert. Well fucking done. You know, dual percussionists, one for straightforward rhythm and one for intense experimental percussive textures. Robert Fripp's usage of atonality and jagged whole tone scales are also pervasive on the harmonic foundations of most of these songs, whether that's created by the violin and the mellotron sort of playing off each other, or just another layer of guitar itself. Fripp penetrates through all this with all the riffing he does. Like, I mean, the first track is just a fantastic example of that. So I'd also probably argue there's a pretty big contrast between David Cross and Robert Fripp's roles. And they do also interchange on this album. I'd argue Larks Part 2 is a prime example of that. And you know, dynamics are the other fundamental aspect of this record, referring to the actual sound itself. Like, as it is implied on Larks Tongues in Aspic Part 1, the dynamic range is immense. And you know what, with that being said, let's start talking about some fucking tracks. So, Larks Tongues in Aspic Part 1, it's a perfect example of the proto-metal which also appears on this record. There is a thunderous riff which comes in a couple minutes in, which really dominates the track when it enters. And that's pretty funny considering it actually begins like this. A gentle kalimba melody, which apparently at one point overstays its welcome, washed away by David Cross's stabbing violins, very menacing, sustained guitar, which leads into the aforementioned riff, and eventually ends up here. And I love this part afterwards because it's this really groovy, jazzy section. The percussion is awesome at this point. It gives you a moment's relief from all the tension which has already been built up. But the rug is just pulled from underneath you as Robert Fripp just continues with this jagged, angular riffing. It's amazing how seamlessly this track goes through contrasting styles, slicing through avant-garde, proto-metal to this horror film theme, like Bernard Herrmann-esque section. These just insane, dissonant, improvisational jazz sections. And somehow it still manages to all feel like one coherent piece. I know this is cliche to say, but the title of this track really complements how it feels. Larks Tongues in Aspic, Bird Tongue in Jelly. It's a concoction of things which really don't sound right together, but somehow actually just work. And I mean, not to eat, more like phonetically or phono-aesthetically. I googled that because I wasn't sure whether phonetically was the correct word, but surely not, right? What wanker's using that? Oh fuck, apparently me. You know, when I listen to this track, I just feel complete invigoration. The left turns it takes and just all of the detail just always make like my ears perk up. I'm always hearing different parts to this track, and I've listened to this album fucking loads of times. It's so in your face at points. The production on this album, while, you know, a lot of people actually online consider it to be kind of rough and people criticise it for it, I think the production style works perfectly. Really does make it feel so hard hitting, where maybe in some places it could be a little bit more refined. It's also really important to mention how much influence Robert Fripp took from sort of European improvisational jazz on this record. Improvising was a massive part of the recording and practice sessions for these albums, and also the live performances really depended on them at this time. It's what Jamie Muir said. A lot of the time, the audience couldn't really tell the difference between what was formal and what wasn't, because the improvising was at a fairly high standard. It was almost telepathic at times. You'd automatically know what the other person was going to do and when they were going to do it. Extraordinary. Those kind of things don't happen very often. And obviously that could just be him gassing him up, but honestly, if that's how he feels, fair enough, and it does really come across in the studio album, which is kind of crazy. But after this track you have Book of Saturday and Exiles, which could not be more different. Book of Saturday is just a ballad that isn't even 3 minutes long, while in contrast its neighbouring tracks are over 13 and 7 minutes long. Book of Saturday features an absolutely beautiful warm guitar melody and just several gently sung verses as well. I think the guitar on this track is maybe one of my favourites ever. It's the tone, while being very simple, is super warm and I love the finger-picked chords that Robert Fripp uses. They're just absolutely beautiful. The progression on this track is amazing. I also think this track shows John Wetton to be one of the better King Crimson vocalists as well. Really like how melancholic his performance on Exiles is. Just has such a gloomy introduction, kind of pretty reminiscent of the track I talked about earlier on Islands, Formentera Lady. And these sections just interspersed between these gorgeous melodic verses, hawking gentle flutes pairing with violins, lovely finger-picked acoustic guitar melody as well. It is just by far the most luscious part of the album, man. This track. The guitar solo at the end, don't even get me started! I fell over. I love the guitar tone as well. It's like he rolled the tone dial down to 0, just had a fat compressor on there, so much sustain, but it's like really understated and powerful. I love Robert Fripp, man. He is awesome. Absolutely one of my guitar heroes personally, and you know, if I was even on the same planet of like level of playing as he is, you know, I'd die happy. Whenever he flaunts this guitar tone, it's very similar to the one he uses on Starless on the album Red. And if you haven't heard that track, please listen to it. But ladies and gentlemen, where there is yin, there is yang, and the next track, Easy Money, goes back to the menacing attitude which the album began with. It's by far the most straightforward rock you're going to get on this album as well. Begins with these thick guitars and this super catchy vocal riff, which I'm just always singing in the shower like an absolute dickhead. You know, you can imagine me outside with this song on, beer belly, Stella in hand, air guitar, all that shit. This track kind of has these sparks of black comedy in them, kind of like Lizard, like I mentioned earlier. And it does it by using these really goofy fucking sound effects, man. It's like spring noises and just like evil laughs in the background. It's really awesome. The lyrics seemingly depict a prostitute, which seems to be so beautiful that she kind of just has every man like wrapped around her finger. It's kind of like comical how easily she can just extract money from these people. It kind of contrasts the reality of prostitution, which is really risky and quite degrading to a lot of women, with the actual control that the lady in this track seemingly has. She seems to kind of reduce these men to like this out of control state. Your admirers in the street got to hoot and stamp their feet in the heat from your physique as you twinkle by in moccasin sneakers. Just like the idea of like hooting, stamping their feet, like just fucking rowdy as hell. They literally can't control themselves. She has them wrapped around her finger. And around 2.5 minutes, this timid guitar is sort of introduced. This slowly building solo. And I can understand this solo kind of being perceived as kind of aimless by some, but I find it to be one of the most captivating moments on the entire album. My favourite memory about this song, I was playing it when I was on holiday in Scotland with my friends. My friend Luca just turns to me and goes, "Mate, King Crimson be like playing interesting notes here and there." And it always makes me smile thinking about that. It makes the music quite refreshing for me, because when someone else hasn't heard it before, it kind of makes you realise how unique some of the choices they make actually are, and just makes you happy, like, oh yeah, you know what, I'm not giving this enough credit. But honestly, I can't really describe much else in this track. It's just absolutely electrifying. It builds, it progresses so heavily towards the end. It's just another amazing crescendo to the plenty of ones that are on this album. So much tension in the guitar solo, which I mentioned earlier. This just doesn't rush into anything. There's so much patience in this part, and I love that about it. It also seamlessly transitions into the next track, the Talking Drum, which is just 7.5 minutes of nothing but patient, sinister build-up, and it's absolutely the most hypnotic track on the album. It begins somehow being very subtly ominous, but also really groovy as well. There's a very expressive use of a double-sided West African drum, which is of course played by Jamie Muir, and as it ramps up, all of the textures on the track just become so increasingly dense as the volume just increases and increases, and it's over 7 minutes, and you're just like, when the fuck is it gonna end? Everything comes so dense until it just explodes at the end with these wailing horns. It is, oh man, this track is sick. Despite being quite repetitive with the sort of repeating bass line, repeating guitar lines from Fripp, it is absolutely nothing but boring. It is so tense throughout. It's just enchanting how you can get lost in all of the detail of it. And of course, like I said, it ends with a violent screech and seamlessly transitions into the final track, Larks, Tungsten Aspic, Part 2. And in a similar vein to Part 1, this track really sums up the eclecticism of the album really perfectly. The whole tone riffing, the rapid time signature changes, use of sound effects as well. Like at 2:30 there are these like weird quiet, like high-pitched tinny noise. It kind of sounds like birds chirping, but I really don't know what it is. It sounds like birds attacking a lady now that I think about it, to be honest. At around 4 minutes the violin enters and it's just so discordant with everything else that's going on. Much like the first track, at points this track just feels like a musical thrashing. And you know, the end of this track, and also the end of the album, culminates in just one giant, just sustained, massive chord. Everything is rumbling and shaking around you. It's like simulating a fucking earthquake. And you know, some people might find this corny. When I was looking at people on Reddit and shit talking about this album, they were like, I don't really like the ending, I think it's a bit cliche. I could see that, you know, just a massive ending. But really, there's no other way you can end off an album like this. Ending it on this just massive explosion of sound, I'm fine with that. And you know what, as I'm speaking about this is an album that really you have to listen to in just one sitting. You know, headphones in, dark room, just let the sound consume you, man. It's insane. I mean, individual tracks absolutely do stand on their own, but to get the scope of everything that's going on and all of the contrast, you have to listen to it in one, man. The flow of the album, I've mentioned it a little bit throughout here and there, but just seamlessly goes into each track. It's extremely well put together. The fact that most of these songs came from improvisation and just they managed to make it so cohesive is incredible. Something I value massively in albums is just how much I can get lost in them. And I know sometimes when I stand here and just explain sounds to a camera, I feel like a bit of a knob, but honestly, if it just gets like one person just to give it a try, like that's something cool for me, because I think getting lost in music is just something that's so exciting, and this album is just an amazing album to do that. There's so much going on. It's overwhelming. It's blistering. It's absolute stimulation, to be honest. You know, I fucking adore Larks, Tungsten Aspic, and I'll be real with you all, I only heard it for the first time last year. I decided to binge the entire King Crimson discography over the spring, and I was absolutely not disappointed. It enamoured me with the first listen and continues to do so now. I'm always discovering new moments because everything in it is so detailed. Obviously, you know, I have a music channel. I love sound, but if you love sound as well, like particularly, it's not a catchy album in any way. It can be quite difficult for a lot of people to go to. It's a very patient listen, but it's so rewarding if you just want to get lost in something, man, something exciting. And a lot of the music on this channel that I tend to focus on is very kind of lyric based, very emotion heavy. And that's true, I do really tend to like sort of big themes or, you know, personal moments, emotional moments. But I just really enjoy Larks, Tungsten Aspic so much because it's just a perfect collage of extremely well performed, eclectic music. It's unlike anything I've personally ever heard, and you know, I'm only one guy, I haven't heard all the music there is out there, but I mean, this album is absolutely amazing, and I've absolutely never heard anything close to like it. It's absolutely my favourite King Crimson album, it's absolutely my favourite progressive rock album of all time, and I think you should listen to it, you know? If you enjoy progressive rock just even a little bit, if you enjoy jazz, if you enjoy classical, if you just like rock music, fucking give it a go. And there's even a lot of really melodic sections in here as well for people, you know? Maybe just listen to the song Exiles or listen to Book of Saturday. There's something for everyone, but like I said, I do think just as one big listen, just give it a go. So yeah, that's Larks, Tungsten Aspic. 50 years later. Thank you very much for watching. I'm going for a bit of a different style here. you know, with the aspect ratio, standing up with the microphone and everything. Just want to add a little bit more fucking energy to my videos, you know what I mean? Sitting down, describing music, it doesn't really, you know, it doesn't really sort of capture how I feel. And, you know, this album excites me so much that I just wanted to move around, and I think I'm going to start doing this more often. So yeah, thank you for watching. You know, fucking comment what you think. If you enjoy this video, just like it and share it about to any fucking old man that actually enjoys prog rock. And, you know, cheers for watching, mate. I'll fuck off now. Bye.